Welcome everyone to MailFuzz TV. I am Peter and today I'm going to be talking about the Pitt Season 2 Episode 5. It is 11 AM apparently, so spoilers for the episode as always, and this is a Patreon sponsored review, so thank you very much to Alison for making the pick. So yeah, obviously heartbreaking ending to this one where our favourite drunk, Louis, might be meeting his demise. We'll see how they cope with that next time. I think more importantly, it's Langdon and Robbie working together after this episode further just kind of establishes the rift that's there right now, with more moments of Robbie sending him away, maybe judging him a little for some of the choices that he made with a patient, and Dr. Al kind of coming in and saying that she's happy Langdon's there. You know, it's kind of like, it's stoking the fires a little bit throughout the episode. Even Dana's kind of like giving Robbie shit for it and saying, hey, just kiss and make up already. But at the end of the episode, they might have to work together now going into the next one to save someone that they both like. And the fact that Langdon's always so good with Louis, the fact that Robbie was going to give him a beer, which feels like a very inappropriate thing to do in a hospital, just because there happened to be a little cooler of beers there because of other unrelated D-plot elements going on. I don't even know if I'm going to talk about that. There's a guy wanting beer and food, and his brother or his friend brings him some booze, which Dana intercepts, but ultimately Robbie's going to be cheeky and take one to Louis. But yeah, it is kind of nice that they might bond or work together again over a patient they both like, someone that they both get on with well. I think there's a lot of potential in that as a storytelling mechanic. But yeah, Robbie's going through a lot of shit this episode, making some big calls, some of which it's easy to sort of like fist pump and be like, yeah, like that's like, you know, he's a badass right now. And in particular, I'm thinking about when he grabs the phone, the woman who's got the infection that's spreading, the one that we sort of teased with the end in the last episode. She's a big focus of this episode. And the good visual thing about this, now obviously there's some realism here, I assume, to this idea that the infection keeps spreading up the leg, but they literally draw on a new line of where the infection was at the start of the episode. So every time you see her leg again, you can see it's like a loading bar. It's going up her leg, so there's a good visual representation of things getting worse and why they're getting more frustrated, particularly why they're getting more frustrated that no one from surgery is coming down to check. They're expecting Garcia. It ends up being like someone who's just officially not been a student for like 2 weeks, and Robbie loses his head and says, send someone down who's not a child, please. He does say don't take it the wrong way. He tries to make it clear that it's nothing personal, but you know, things are getting serious here. We need like a professional set of eyes who have experience to kind of help assess this situation. So yeah, the two big things that happen here is that when she's still pretty feeling okay otherwise, even though they're all concerned, she's on the phone to her employer and she's worried she's going to get fired for not being back to work on time, and like she kind of offers, hey, do you want to talk to one of the doctors? And like Langdon's like, nah, please don't. But after she seemingly is getting more scared, Robbie kind of whips off his glove, takes her phone, and makes it very clear that if he fires her, that she will sue his ass and that he will be backing her up in court as her doctor, and then hangs up on him. There's a bit of a power move, but that's the one where I think you can just feel good about that one no matter what. Like this guy seems like an asshole from what little we get. The idea that she's so scared of missing work for a serious health issue, which is getting more serious by the second. So Robbie stepping in there feels really good. The other one where I think people might come down on either side of like whether or not he did the right thing here, but because they wait so long for surgery to come down, and then once Garcia finally does show up and she's saying, oh, we have to get a scan before we can do anything, Robbie gets really frustrated because it's been waiting so long that by this point the infection is going to spread all the way up to her pelvis by the time this scan even comes back. So he basically just shows how bad it is by cutting into the main part of the infection, and it just splits apart like nothing. Like there's no resistance to the blade. It just goes bleh, and it is disgusting. It's gross. And Robbie's making his point, and Garcia is saying that he's acting like a maniac, pretty much. That wasn't our exact words, but that was there was some shock in the room. He was pulling a bit of a power move to kind of just get the ball rolling, because obviously he thinks it's the right thing to do in the situation. Protocols, this doesn't feel like it's going with the protocols of the situation. I would expect it feels like he's making a big judgment call here that could get him into trouble later on down the line. To the point where when someone says, hey, is there any hope of saving her leg as she goes up to surgery, he says, I'm just hoping they'll save her life. So it doesn't sound like he even thinks there's a chance that she'll keep her leg at this point. But yeah, so I mean that's kind of the more tense plot of the episode, and it gives Robbie a lot of chances to have these big character moments, and even little ones where he tells Langdon he's not needed anymore, and things like that. There's a lot of plot that comes out of this throughout the episode. The other big patients in the episode include a prisoner who got beat up really badly in prison. And the kind of the running thing with this, which I thought they were going to do something with, and maybe they still will next episode, but there's a guard here who keeps like handcuffing him to the bed, and it kind of gets in the way a little bit from time to time where they have to move him, so the guy has to come up and uncuff him, and then cuff him again. And Whitaker and the others like, is this really necessary? He can barely move on his own. And he's like, look, this is the rules for his safety and for yours. Like, he stays cuffed. He was literally in the orange prison outfit when he came in. So he's got a lot of wounds, though. He's got stab wounds and various things. And I wonder if they'll play off this idea of maybe the security getting laxed at the Doctor's request, and maybe he'll try something next episode. They might not, but it feels like that's something where we might be going. The bigger thing here, for me, it's a small moment, but Whitaker and King don't get a pop culture reference here. Now, I don't... Sometimes when they make a pop culture reference in a TV show and like the young characters don't get it, it can make me feel old. This one isn't one of those, because this one's actually before my time. I just happened to get the reference. But Robbie makes a reference when Dr. Al recommends, because they're having trouble like stitching a wound up. It keeps just breaking through the skin. And she gives like a bit of advice of a different type of stitching or method to use. And Robbie refers to it as a MacGyver like job, or a Dr. MacGyver move. And it cuts to Whitaker and King, and they're like, hey, does Dr. MacGyver work in this hospital? And she's like, I don't think so. Like, neither of them get the reference. That all he's making a reference to is that MacGyver would like build his way out of situations. And I've never even seen a single episode of MacGyver. I just know that's what he was known for. He would make devices or traps or tools out of whatever was lying around and make it work, right? That's what the reference is here. And neither of them get it, which gave me a chuckle. I imagine there's people of a certain age who are going to feel a sting with that line. Nothing will ever beat. There's a scene in the Marvel show Runaways, which wasn't very good, all things considered. It was kind of watchable at best, but there was a joke in that where a bunch of teenagers find a VHS tape, and then after about 5 seconds of looking at it, they say, what the hell is this? And it cut to the credits. I don't think anything will ever make me feel as old in a TV show as that moment in that show. But for the people who are old enough to have grown up watching MacGyver, that one was for you. I do actually like that moment regardless of the joke, though, because Dr. Al's like giving all this advice with her back to the door, and Robbie's standing there just listening to what the advice is. And she just knows that he's there, because at the end of what she's saying, she's like, what do you make of that, Dr. Robbie? And he agrees, and it's all very playful, but it's just interesting that she knew he was there the whole time. Like it felt like a scene where she was never going to know that he was listening, but she actually knew the entire time. That's important, I think, especially since all these little things where we're still playing with this idea of their relationship throughout the episode. And I don't mean romantic relationship, I just mean their relationship, their working relationship, because it feels a little bit more playful. But at the same time, she also calls him out that he keeps asking how her patients are doing, as if she's working under him. And he tries to make it clear that it's just because he may have to step at any point, so he needs to know the status of all the different patients and what they're going through. And she's like, well, I'm also in your position, so I should also know that. And he says, touche. So there's a little bit of friction still there, even though they're being a lot more pleasant and smiley about it as they're going on. I think that, you know, their scenes, like, I'm glad they toned it down a little bit after the first like 2 or 3 episodes, because it would have been quite heavy to have it at that level the entire time. I think them being a little bit more jokey, a little bit more friendly about it, even though there is still some friction bubbling, I think is a bit more enjoyable to watch in the here and now in the episode we're watching. For at least until things get to a point where there is like a proper fight, there's a proper disagreement for something. And there's a little bit bubbling there again with the AI stuff, where, you know, there's a running joke in this episode where Santos is trying to do her charts with dictation, and she keeps getting interrupted because of patients needing care, of she has to go train Ogilvy and a bunch of things. And eventually Dr. Al's like, hey, why don't you try my AI app? It'll help, you know, so you're 30% more efficient, you'll get to go home sooner. And Robbie's the one who listens to this and jumps in and says, yeah, also, but you'll be expected to treat more patients with no extra pay, and eventually people will get laid off. And you know, he gives the arguments that you would expect him to give. And Dr. Al's like, no, I'm not trying to get rid of my own profession. I am simply trying to make sure I can spend more time with my family and my child. That's what's most important. So there's again, that rift is kind of brewing, and I expect that some problem because someone's used an AI app at some point is probably going to happen. And maybe it'll be Santos. That's possible. Now, the fun of Santos in this episode, as much as I still think, you know, and maybe the entire season's a long, like, reckoning for her, because she was so cocky back in episode 1 about doing a double residency, but the pressure of, like, keeping up with her charts and, like, keeping up with all the requests from Dr. Al and training the newbies and all the rest of it, like, it feels like she's really starting to feel like how difficult it is to, like, you know, she's not as invincible as she thinks she is, and it feels like we're sort of getting some of that. But the fun of her being her, though, is that when she decides to be, like, the catalyst for someone else's lessons, it can actually be fun. Now, she's a bit rude to Whittaker this episode, and that's a bit of a shame because Whittaker's such a pleasant, sweet boy. However, Ogilvy's got it coming. He deserves a little bit of a just desserts, and he gets it in this episode in a couple of different ways. One, he inspects an old lady who has TB, so now he has to get tested, which will take time, and if he ends up having it, he needs to, like, take meds for months, and it's a whole thing, and like, so he's, like, immediately kind of upset about that. But then the bigger one is there's an old lady who's in for various things, but mainly the end result is that she's not been having bowel movements, and the enema's not worked. She needs to have her system cleared. She needs to go number 2, as it were. And Santos basically ropes in Ogilvy for this. He says, I've never done it before, shouldn't I watch someone else do it first? And instead of doing it herself, she brings in Whittaker and makes Whittaker do the first, well, finger. Although he just does one. Whittaker does the one to show how it works, and it's obviously as gross as you think it is. He puts the jelly on the finger, he pulls out, and there's some feces there. And then it's up to Ogilvy to keep going. And when the old lady farts, which is a good sign because it means they're making progress, he's like, can I stop? And, like, every time he says that, like, no, you have to keep going. But then there's a moment, of course, where it builds up, there's some gurgling, and Whittaker's like, you might want to stand back. And sure enough, the old lady blasts him with shit all over the front of him. And it's gross, of course. It's a fun moment, though, because it's like a nice, like, callback to season 1 with Whittaker getting various things, like thrown at him throughout the season. I don't think he ever actually got poop, but, you know, he had urine, he had blood, and he had, like, medical fluid all covered in him. He had to keep getting the new scrubs. That was, like, a running thing all season last time. So it was kind of an interesting sequence of watching, like, almost the parents of Santos and Whittaker be the mum and dad to this new trainee doctor, where her attitude in putting him through the paces was something that he'd kind of earned, but also Whittaker, like, got to witness what happened to him happened to one of the newbies, and again, lessons have been learned. It really felt there was a lot of humbling going on in this episode for Ogilvy, so we'll see how much that takes, and if, like, how much he's grown up, it feels like, by the end of the day, once we get more of it. But I think that was a kind of interesting, like, pairing of having both Whittaker and Santos for that scene, because it feels like, like I say, it felt like almost like two parents with their different parenting styles, kind of, like, having an influence in what was happening in the scene. So yeah, that was pretty good. That stuff. Elsewhere, I think not much Samira this episode. She's in, like, one of the surgery scenes. She's with the prisoner, so she's kind of there constantly. But I wouldn't say she has much plot in the way of her own, other than that her phone rings again. Another big plot this episode, which has both Cassie and Javadi involved. The patient is a lady, a wife and mother who has lung cancer, and it is terminal. Like, she is going to pass away from this after some time. but she's had a seizure, and that's why she's into the hospital. She hit her leg and her head, and they're patching her up. And this is the sad story of the episode. This is the story where, you know, the husband's very concerned for her, and, you know, they're talking about all this stuff. But where it really gets sad, though, is when this other woman shows up who is kind of like her, I can't remember the word they used, but it was effectively like her carer, like for, you know, building up to passing away. It was kind of like the equivalent of like a midwife, but instead of for a pregnancy, for like someone who's going to die. And that was pretty sad. And there's also these little references of like, oh, this bone will take 6 weeks to heal, and the patient says, if I live that long. And, you know, the husband looks very sad when she says that, and it's all very, you know, it's hitting all these notes, right? It's definitely the downer plot of the episode by far. But I think where it really hits, and you can tell that it's hitting our main characters, Javadi and especially Mackay, are feeling emotional at various points during these sequences. The big capper to the plot line is that she needs to go to the bathroom. And so much of this episode's been about, oh, like, you'll need all this new equipment at home because you need more care, and you need to get, you know, a hospital bed, you have to get a wheelchair, you have to get some handlebars installed in the bathroom, all these different things. And the end of the episode, or the end of the storyline, is that she used to go to the bathroom, and they get out a bedpan, and she's like, no, please, someone just help me to the bathroom, please? And they're like, sure, yeah, we can do that. She doesn't want to use the bedpan. But as soon as they sit her up, she cries in pain. It hurts. And it's very clear that it's not going to be an option, right? And the kind of the sweet, or the bittersweet moment is that the woman, the carer who's there for her, makes an excuse for the husband to leave the room. She says, hey, can I talk to you outside? We need to do some planning stuff. Like, she makes up some bullshit excuse. And I think it's very clear in the scene that everyone in the room, including the patient probably, but certainly the husband, understands what's happening when the carer suggests this. She's coming up with an excuse for him to leave the room because it's very, very clear that the wife, the patient, feels uncomfortable about like how this looks and how she has to do this in front of her husband. Like, this idea of her dignity is eroding, and that she doesn't want her husband to see this particular part. This you know, that's why she's so determined to go to the bathroom. She wants to feel like she can do normal things. And I think this idea of like them all kind of like, you know, getting the husband out the room so she can at least do it not in front of him. Like, it's a very sad sequence, but you kind of get that everyone knows what's happening. Everyone in the room understands that we're making up an excuse so that we don't have to do this. We don't have to say, oh, hey, I'll leave so I don't have to watch. Or, and it's not that he wants to leave. He clearly wants to be here and look after her. He wants to help. But she wants, if you can even call it privacy at this point, there's still going to be like 2 or 3 people in the room helping her. But it's that, and it felt like a very true to life moment. Honestly, as someone who grew up in a house with someone who had MS and encountered that attitude of, I want to prove that I can do this thing on my own, even in some situations where the person could not do the thing on their own. This felt very true to me, and very, very kind of, and in this case in particular, very kind of sweet, because it's like, obviously the husband's seen her be very sick for some time now, and they've been fighting this illness for years, with various forms of treatment, chemotherapy, that kind of thing. And things have deteriorated quite badly here, on the run up to the end. And it kind of feels like, you know, the wife is kind of wanting to draw a line. Like, you know, as much as it's going to be impossible to do, she kind of doesn't want her husband to see another example of her needing help and being a you know, a patient. She's feeling like, it seems like she's feeling like a burden, right? That's the impression I think you get. Particularly when they're talking about all the new equipment that needs to be added into the house, and she's like, oh God, like, I'm causing all of this commotion. I feel like I'm being more of a burden on my family than I'm actually anything else, right? All they're doing is taking care of me. All I am is this person that needs to be taken care of, rather than fulfilling you know, a role as a wife, a mother, or, you know, a friend, whoever, right? Like, all of this is here in this sequence without them saying it super out loud. And that's good, because it, you know, it feels like they're getting to the nitty gritty of it. You're feeling it as an audience without them spelling it out. And I think that's in contrast a little bit to the other plot about the dad, the diabetic dad, who is worried about the hospital bills, where that feels a little bit less neat because it is spelling things out a little bit, and also the resolution doesn't really feel that great either. Where they come up with a solution to cut down. It's like, hey, we can get 40% of your hospital bill cut off. And he's like, yeah, but couldn't this stay for a few days in here be like $100,000? So I'd still have to pay 60. I can't really afford that. And it's like, well, yeah. And then Joy, actually, the noob, has the idea. I guess this is the only like character bit that Samira really has, is Samira's the other one in the room for this, and she doubts and even looks a little annoyed that Joy suggested this, because it felt like it was contradicting her a little bit. But afterwards says, hey Joy, that was actually a good idea. And her idea was to like put her in like the cheaper part of the hospital, basically. Even though it's a little unorthodox, it would save a lot of money. However, they kind of work it out though, that even after the discount from being in the cheaper part of the hospital, and then the 40% off that, it would still probably cost about 20 grand for the time he needs to stay here. And at this point, his wife and daughter are like, take it. Like, you need to get this care. You have to do it. We'll make ends meet. The daughter's going to take more shifts at her part-time job or whatever it is. And honestly, like they have to have a resolution to this, but yeah, I still think that's still like an obscene amount of money. If for people who are like working paycheck to paycheck and are struggling to just like pay all the bills they have, like 20 grand might as well be 50 grand, might as well be 100 grand, might as well be $1 million. You know, at a certain point, like they say there's a payment plan, but a payment plan for $20,000, like how much is that we're talking a month they're paying, and for how long? Like probably the rest of his life. At that point, maybe, you know, unless things like change significantly with work or whatever, and they get, you know, a job with health insurance or something. But like, it didn't feel as neat a solution as perhaps the episode wanted it to feel at that point. Because I'm like, well, still 20 grand. Like, that still feels like a lot of money he needs to pay, you know, when they're saying that they can't really afford anything. So, you know, like a little bit of a disconnect there. Obviously, it's still getting the IDs across that this is a problem and it's something that needs to be like addressed, specifically, obviously, in the US where this is set. Because again, this is very different to where I live, where this would be free. So, but you know, taking it as it is, like, you know, 20 grand is still an obscene amount of money if you were struggling to pay your bills, right? It doesn't really. It may as well be any amount at that point still. Even though it is objectively much better than 60 grand, it's still 20 grand. So, hey. Yeah, I guess another little thing we do have to talk about. I talked about the Langdon and Robbie stuff, but there is another couple of little Langdon moments that are worth mentioning, or at least one in particular that's very important. And that is a scene where it's with Louis, actually, where Louis is still shaking and they need to give him some medication for that. And Langdon says, oh, he needs this, right? And I think it's actually literally the thing he was addicted to, actually. But Whittaker is there, and Whittaker kind of interjects and says, oh, I'll put the order in instead of Langdon. And it's just a kind of awkward little moment where it sounds like, oh, no, you shouldn't be putting in the order thing for that. That'll look dodgy. Even though Whittaker tries to sort of cover it by saying, oh, just because I'm I'm his doctor, I've been the one taking care of him, this is my patient, I should be the one putting the order in. And Langdon just kind of lets him have that excuse, but it feels kind of awkward. And Whittaker feels bad about it, and he's like sort of telling the others later when they're operating on the prisoner. So, you know, it's a nice moment because you know from Whittaker, like, it really like was not ill intent, right? There's not a part of me that thinks Whittaker was trying to throw this in his face. I think the second it came out of his mouth, he realized how it sounded. And, you know, and maybe in some ways, yeah, the reason why he said it maybe is because he thought, oh, maybe he shouldn't be putting in an order for that on his first day back after all this. But, you know, if he's good to be back at work, then he should be good to be back at work. He should be able to order the things he needs for his patients. So, yeah, it's a little blip, creates some tension. And I wouldn't be surprised if Whittaker tries to apologize to him properly later, or at the very least, maybe they'll work well together later, and it'll kind of erase the bad mojo that's perhaps been created here. So there was that. There was an idiot who tried to brand himself with like a dry ice, or like a well, basically instead of heating up the metal, they put it in dry ice, and it caused this horrific like burn on his skin. And apparently his brother already had this, and it seemed to turn out quite well for him. Langdon and Donnie seemed quite excited by watching the video of it, although they weren't less amused by the idea that in a few months they'll try again. So again, little funny plot just to kind of pepper things up throughout the episode. They have to do that, you know, because like sometimes we get really miserable plots and we have a really sort of sad, miserable ending potentially. So you want to have some comedy peppered in there to try and spruce things up. I feel like Cassie, like she has had like this, like a couple of really sad plots in the last few episodes already, between the you know, the ex-wife and the you know, the husband who's got the brain tumor, or might be a tumor, might not be a tumor in the words of Arnold, but you know, she has that, and then she had the cancer patient who's, you know, again, it's like a married couple and like the slow walk to death. Almost seems like a running theme for her might be like couples of some kind, if they keep buying that home to convince her she has to like get a dating life going or something. But that felt like, you know, she's had a couple of big sad ones recently. But yeah. Yeah, I'm just making sure, I'm running through the old brain here, just making sure there's no other like huge plots. There's a little bit more with the betting and stuff, which I guess I should comment on the mystery of why the other hospital can't take patients. Like, they still don't know, and like the charge nurse from the other hospital's not responded to Dana. So it's almost like, I don't, like, if it's something really bad, you think they would have heard about it by now if it was like some big like disaster happened over there. But at the same time, the mystique now of them like questioning what's going on over there has been drawn out long enough where it's starting to feel like, oh, it needs to be something a little exciting. You know, like, you know, I think Donnie changes his bet to sinkhole, which would be wild. And I'm not even sure what I expect it to be necessarily. But the way that they were standing around sort of saying, oh, we can't get in touch with them, what do you think it is? It makes it feel like we're at least building up a little bit, where I'm like, you know, I want a good payoff. I want a good reveal as to what's going on. That would be nice. I guess elsewhere I should just mention as well, Joy had the idea for the diabetic patient, because her and her family had to like get creative when her grandmother was sick and dying. I think it was leukemia, I think she said. But yeah, it was basically just getting to know her a little bit, and maybe getting a little insight into why her attitude is the way it is. But just a little bit for now, and we'll see how that progresses. I mean, credit to the episode. I think it was very well paced, this episode, and it was bouncing around very, very effectively. And I think the core stories all surrounding Robbie and him dealing with the main couple of patients that he was getting involved with, I think worked quite well. There was a lot of, you know, a lot of walking and talking, as there usually is, and a lot of him kind of like dipping his head into all the other plots. But it felt very kind of like anchored by him in this episode. And even more characters joking about his sabbatical and going on the motorbike. His girlfriend's like talking to Dana and like revealing too much about how he sleeps at night. And there's just little human moments more than anything else. But you know, it does make you wonder though, is he taking all these big swings with the phone, with the cutting the woman's leg? Like, you know, is he going too far because he is ready to say, F it, I'm giving up and I'm leaving? Or, you know, the system that he's in has just broken him over and over again because he keeps trying to do the best he can, but the system just is keeping him down and getting in the way, and he's all out of F's to give, basically, is the vibe I'm getting from this episode. But we shall see where we go with the next episode. So that is my thoughts on this episode of The Pit. It took a little bit to get someone covered in a bodily substance, but we got there. Everyone can give a round of applause and feel satisfied that Ogilvy was covered in shit. So thank you for joining me. I do appreciate it. That has been me. You can support the content and the channel via patreon.com/MailFuzzTV or via super thanks or channel. When I say channel membership, super thanks are also a thing if you want to do that as a one-time thing. But super thanks and channel memberships. But check out the Mail Fuzz Movies channel for all the movie podcasts. I'm still kind of getting over from being sick myself. It's kind of lingered just a little bit annoyingly for the past week. So I think my voice sounds normal now, but like I still feel it a little bit just in the back. I'm not going to the ER though, at least not yet. Maybe if it keeps persisting, I'll make a trip and see what the Scottish version of Robbie's like. But that is me, so thank you very much for joining me. I do appreciate it. Keep watching TV. Have you got any vanilla?